Hello, and welcome to Hardin County Extension Today. I'm Amy Aldendorfer, the horticulture agent here in Hardin County at the Extension Office. And today we are going to talk about how to grow lettuce. Since it's the beginning of April, we can definitely start our seedlings and start our plants just outright in the garden, and we'll kind of walk through that. So hopefully I hope you enjoy the show. And if you have any questions, you can definitely contact us. So I have a couple of assumptions that you have a garden spot in mind. It doesn't have to be on paper. It doesn't even actually have to be in the ground, but you just you're thinking about one. And that you will take a soil test and you will adjust the nutrients accordingly, because I will talk about what those plants need on top of bringing those soil tests up to the good level that we need for that. So those are some of the assumptions I make in this presentation. So where are we going to plant these lettuces? And there's lots of different kinds of lettuce, and we'll go through some of my favorite varieties in the middle of this presentation. You can plant them in just a regular garden bed. We do plant them kind of early. This one actually is very good because it has a soaker hose in the back. This is the soaker hose, because lettuce does need a little bit more water than you would normally think because they're small plants. So we want to keep them nice and cool with lots of water. Okay, so here's a raised bed. And I think this one's just a Burmese raised bed, but you can see that looks like they've kind of seeded in little patches, and they may have had a couple, put down 5 or 6 seed in a little hole and space those out in their raised garden bed, or they're planting them out of these flats. You can also buy lettuce plants if you don't want to start them from seed, but they're pretty easy to start from seed. Here is a very nice professional looking raised bed. Probably they've planted it on the long rows, and this looks like there's 3 different kinds of lettuce. This green bunchy lettuce here, some red lettuce, and probably some black seeded Simpson there in the back. In front of looks like they're tomato plants or some other type of garden plant. This one looks like it's in a professional garden. So we can all aspire to have lettuce plants that look like that. Here's one in just a raised bed. Again, this one's a mixed varieties, probably either seeded into this bed or transplanted. So there's all places that we can grow these kind of plants in our vegetable gardens. Lettuce does really, really well in a container. So we're going to kind of look at that, but it needs to be at least 8 inches deep and any size, but you will have to water them regularly. Lettuce is a cool season plant, so it really likes to grow in the spring, and then we can replant it kind of in late summer, early fall, and get a fall crop. And I'll tell you the truth, the fall crop tastes a whole lot better than the spring crop, and I'll tell you why. So if you're going to do containers, you want them at least 8 inches deep, because you'll need to water them regularly. You need to get them kind of close to the hose. And the soil mix is pretty standard. It's compost, coir or peat moss, perlite, and a balanced fertilizer. But because the soilless mix doesn't have any nutrients in it, you're going to have to fertilize them regularly. And a balanced fertilizer is one of those that has the numbers are all the same. So it's 20, 20, 20. 19, 19, 19, 10, 10, 10. If you've got 10, 10, 10, and you need 20, 20, 20, you just put on twice as much. And that's how that works. So we'll talk about fertilization a little bit later too. But the containers are whatever you have. The caveat is they have to have a hole in the bottom. So the traditional half whiskey barrel does very well. We actually did these in the front of our office one year. We had a salad garden with a lot of different lettuces. We had carrots growing, we had some onions, and we got them all to kind of mature at the same time for us. This one's on a upper level balcony. Very nice little bowl of lettuce there. Salad bowl. You could do them in raised beds. Again, this one's a little short, so this one might be a little bit up north, but I would make that a little deeper. Because that thin little bit of soil will dry out really, really quickly. This may also have been a starter bed for them. Window boxes or rail fence boxes work really well for lettuces, especially if they get a little bit of shade. But isn't that pretty? I mean, I would prefer that over some flowers. And then, you can always recycle. Sometimes your grocery sack, this one actually has some soil in it. There's a little hole in the bottom in the corner that drains, and they can move that around. So they can put it in the sun if it needs a little sun. They can put it in the shade if it needs a little bit of shade. So if you have some extra reusable grocery sacks, reuse them again for that. So when are we planting? In Kentucky, we can plant lettuce seeds directly into the soil as early as late of March. But we've had some really good weather, so our soils will probably be warm enough. And then the latest that we want to plant them is the middle of August. You could actually start planting them about the 1st of July. They'll come up very, very fast because that soil is nice and warm. and they will actually mature into the late fall. And if they get a little bit of frost, it's okay. They're frost tolerant. As long as it doesn't get really, really into that deep freezing, probably into the 20s, they will be okay. And lettuce tends to tolerate some shade, and will probably prefer some shade if you do a spring lettuce that's going to mature into May and June. If it has a little bit of shade, it won't get quite as bitter or need as much water if it's a little shady, which is kind of cool with lettuce. So we're planting, and most lettuces that I'm going to talk about need about a 6-inch spacing. And we will not be talking about like iceberg lettuce that has a big head on it, because it'd be cheaper to buy that in the grocery store, even at today's prices, than it would be to grow that, because iceberg tends to take a really long time to grow to make that really nice head. And we just don't have the spring for that. So we're going to talk about some leaf lettuces and things of that sort. Now, we will talk about how much to plant, but the cool thing is you can plant at 2 weeks intervals. So starting at the end of March, plant every 2 weeks, and you can have a continuous harvest throughout the season. And you don't have to plant a whole lot at any one time and get a whole lot of lettuce at any one time. It kind of spaces out your harvest and makes them a little smaller and a little bit more manageable, because it's really hard to save lettuce. If you're going to plant them in rows in a traditional garden, you're going to thin them to 6-inch spacings, which is about 2 hand widths. So if you put your hands together without your thumbs, that's about 6 inches, depending how big your hands are. I always try to figure out an easy way, because I tend to lose rulers in the garden space if you're doing that. And this seems to be just kind of a square foot garden that they've got going on here in this picture. And they've spaced those out like every 6 inches. And if you're planting transplants, it's really easy to figure out those spacings. My question to you is, how many seeds are in an ounce of lettuce seed? There's 25,000 lettuce seeds in an ounce. That is a lot of seeds. Your packets won't have that many seeds in it, but they'll have a lot. So using the whole lettuce packet out in the garden, you'll be thinning a lot of plants out there. And sometimes I just can't stand to pull them out when they're just little tiny baby plants. Here's a little thing to help you kind of figure out how many plants you need. So if you're a person who likes to eat salad or likes to eat lettuce or use lettuce, the bacon wilted lettuce sandwich salads are awesome. You need about a half a pound per foot, which is about 2 plants. If you're going to, in your traditional vegetable garden, if you're going to, about 2 plants is what you're going to eat per week. And you plan for 1 to 2 plants per person per week. So if you're planting seedlings, I always plant a couple of seeds just to make sure they grow. And every couple of weeks, I'm going to plant, if it's just me, I'm going to plant 4 plants every 2 weeks. And that'll give me enough lettuce to set me through the summer and the fall. Otherwise, and then you just count how many people you have in your household that'll eat lettuce, and you go from there. This is my favorite part. We're going to talk about lots of different kinds of varieties today. My favorite is Buttercrunch. Buttercrunch is a very heat tolerant. It's bib type. So you see the bib is this rounded lettuce. It's a loose kind of head. It kind of came into as a favorite in the mid 60s. 1960s, I should say. It has some of these leaves can be tinged with red that form this beautiful rosette in the garden that holds up well under stress and has good bolt resistance. We didn't talk about bolting. Bolting is when lettuce gets stressed and it gets hot, the stem will elongate and it will put up a flower, which is not what you want to do, because when that plant starts to bolt and starts to kind of elongate a little bit, it will get bitter and it will not taste very good. So at that point, you're going to cut those plants out and plant something else in that spot. Buttercrunch has a good bolt resistance, so it's going to take that heat a little bit longer. It grows best in full sun, but it will tolerate some shade and even appreciates the shade in the spring in hot climates, which I would consider us a hot climate for lettuce. So if you're thinking about planting lettuce in your garden and you're planting in the spring, think about what you can grow as a shade crop over the top of it. So if you can put up a trellis for cucumbers, or plant it, underneath your tomato plants, or put your tomato plants in the middle of your lettuce plants, that will give it some shade and it will slow the bolting process down. So this is Buttercrunch. It's been around forever. It's got a really good buttery texture to it, and it doesn't get as bitter quite as fast. So then we have Simmeron, and Simmeron is kind of a romaine type. So the leaves on this romaine type are going to be upright. They're not going to be as tight as what you would find romaine in the grocery store, but it's very tasty. It has these bright red and green leaves that fade to deep red tips. It has good disease resistance, which is good, and bolt resistance. It gets about 10 to 12 inches tall with those deep green and red leaves. It has a tender, crisp texture and good flavor, and it's virtually impervious to bolting. Now, granted, I took that off of the seed catalog site, so take that with a little grain of salt, but it looks really, really good in a salad with that green and red. It is a 60 to 70 day lettuce, so it's going to come in pretty quickly. It's going to grow very quickly and very easily. The other thing that I wanted to say was that even with the Buttercrunch and with the Simmeron and some of these leafier type lettuces, you really want to, you can pick individual leaves off instead of cutting down the whole plant, and that'll extend your harvest for a little longer. So you can take 2 or 3 leaves from each plant as they get mature. Then you have good big leaves, but then you leave those little leaves to get big. And then it just kind of extends your harvest. So you're not cutting the whole plant down. And when that plant gets kind of tired, it's not growing quite as fast, it may be a little bit bitter, then we can cut that plant down and start over. And that happens with all of these. Another good one is called Tom Thumb. If you're a single person or just 2 people in a household, Tom Thumb only gets about the size of a tennis ball. But it came into, it's an heirloom lettuce, dates from the 1850s. It makes these little teeny tiny cabbage-like green heads, only 3 to 4 inches across. So these I would probably cut the whole head and eat that as a salad. It only needs 4 to 8 hours of sun. It sprouts in 7 to 10 days. It's frost hardy, like all of our lettuces are. And this one can grow in small pots, in window boxes, hanging baskets. It can be planted as a ground cover under trees because it's so small. It just looks like a little green, little green meatball that you can actually eat as a salad, which I think is kind of fun. But this is Tom Thumb, and it's a butterhead type lettuce, kind of like Buttercrunch. If you want to wow your neighbors, this is Forenschulis, which is German for speckled trout, or it's probably Austrian. It comes from Austria. It's an old heirloom there. It means speckled like a trout. This is a romaine type lettuce, so the leaves are going to be a little elongated, but these are splashed with red instead of having that red tip like we saw before. It's very beautiful. It's very tasty. Again, 4 to 8 hours of sun, 60 to 80 degrees is their ideal temperature. Air temperature is 60 to 80 degrees, and definitely frost hardy. But wouldn't this look really pretty underneath like a flowering crabapple tree or something of that sort in the mulch? So Paris Island Cos is again another kind of old-fashioned lettuce. This is a romaine type again, but these leaves are pretty crunchy. They're pretty substantial. They have a buttery green heart, and they're a vigorous grower. So these are kind of one of those things that you can have baby romaine greens in as little as 21 days. This one's ideal for lettuce wraps. And this plant resists tip burn, which we're going to talk about in our diseases, and is mosaic virus tolerant. We don't see a lot of mosaic virus in our lettuces, but this one looks pretty good up close. This one's planted a little closer, but even in a half whiskey barrel, they look really pretty. It looks like they've got some onions growing in their lettuce patch also for this Paris Island Cos, which is a romaine type lettuce. Black-seeded Simpson, you see these seeds all over the place. And this one has been around for 150 years. It's hugely popular. It's very tender. It's a delicately flavored lettuce. And this one you can pick off individual leaves fairly easily. It's very ruffly, and I'll tell you, it holds the dressing really well. And it'll tolerate that cooler, wet soils. So we can plant this one even probably earlier than the end of March in our neck of the woods. This is an heirloom, and I believe you can harvest those baby greens in less than 30 days. But the growth cycle on this black-seeded Simpson is 45 to 60 days. So it's fast for a lettuce. 45 days is pretty quick to have a whole lettuce plant going on. It's good resistant to heat, to cold. It doesn't have a lot of infestation problems. So we'll talk about insects in a minute, but aphids are not a problem. And they do need a little bit about 6 inches apart. And this one is really good for that hot bacon wilted salad. Ask me how I know. And then red sails. This is another kind of leafy lettuce that you can pick individual leaves from or cut the whole plant. This one received the All-American Selection Award when it was introduced in 1985. It was the first red lettuce that kind of came out, and it's really good, and nothing has really beat it. These are really large plants. They do get about, 8 to 12 inches big, the leaves do. They do tend to turn a little green towards the base of the plant, but they have a very soft texture and a buttery flavor. You can sow that directly in the garden, and you can even like transplant these out. So you can start them now or started them 2 weeks ago and lay them out even as early as the first week of April. So, and this one has a 45-day maturity. So like black-seeded Simpson, red sails is also a very short days, a very young plant to grow. I think radishes are about 28 days for that. So if you think about radishes and lettuces and being, 28 to 45 days, that's awesome. So the list that I had gotten is this Kentucky Gardens vegetable cultivars. Now the last one we have is from 2013, but the names are still good. We're still good on those names. So I kind of highlighted, this is the front page. And if you just Google, if you go to the UK page and Google ID 133 up here in the corner, that'll work. And then I just kind of cropped out the lettuce leaf type so that you could have them. And then as you're like, well, what are these letters over here? And these are the resistance or tolerance to those diseases that we kind of talked about. So if you look at red sails is resistant to premature bolting. That kind of helps out. And these are the days to maturity. So you see that black-seeded Simpson is 45 as well as red sails. You get into Buttercrunch, which is actually 75 days. I'd probably grow Buttercrunch in the fall. And that way, that one's kind of the longest one that you have. And I think if you're doing 75-day Buttercrunch, you're collecting the whole head at that point. You'll get a nice head in 75 days for that. Okay, so we've picked our cultivars, yay. And this is how you grow them. Lettuce need really constant, even moisture. So I would definitely get out the soaker hoses. If you're growing them in containers, make sure that you're watering them more as it gets more warm. But sometimes with lettuces, even in a container, you're going to water them to at least twice a day as we get into May and a little bit of June, because you definitely, when they lack in water, that's when they get bitter. So watering is most important for lettuce. And, about an inch of rain a week, but I would kind of overwater them just a wee bit. And if you've got them spaced right, they're pretty good on that. Fertilization, bring them up to garden soil test recommendations. But again, they don't need to side dress. They're pretty short timers in the garden. They don't grow for a very long time. And actually, if you over fertilize them with especially nitrogen, you reduce your yield and your quality. You kind of want to be a little leaner on these lettuces. They tend to grow better when there's not as much available nitrogen out there in the garden. Okay, talked about all the good things. Now let's get to the insects, into the pests. So these are aphids, and aphids come in lots of colors. This one just happens to be yellow. But most of the time aphids are the color of the leaves. So they're that light green color. Sometimes they're dark green. They can be pink or rosy. Sometimes they can be black. And you can tell this one is an aphid because it's got two little tailpipes here at the end. And they excrete honeydew, which is basically just glorified, refined plant sap. But you can get some molds and mildews that grow on this sap as they leak out the end. And if you've ever parked your car underneath a tree and it's gotten that sticky sap on it, you're like, oh, the tree's leaking sap. Well, no, you've got aphids in the top of your tree. So usually a good rinse with water will get rid of the honeydew. But to get rid of aphids, the easiest thing is to spray them off with a stream of water. If you've got a really bad infestation, insecticidal soap will work fairly well. Because it gives them a bad case of dishpan hands. Has anybody washed their own dishes and gotten some dishpan hands for that? And that's easily washed off the leaf. It's not going to leave a residue on your lettuce when you eat that. So when you rinse your lettuce off, to make sure there's no bugs in it before you eat it, it will also rinse off any of the residues. But I think insecticidal soap has a 1 day or not even a 1 day pre-harvest interval for that. And that's probably one of the chemicals that I do keep in my arsenal. Corn earworms, Not a big problem, but sometimes they will eat your lettuce, and they just eat holes in it like a caterpillar will. If you do have a lot of caterpillars, BT is another one that will do very well. It's an organic product that will do very well to keep the caterpillars off. And there might be another caterpillar in here in a minute. Cutworms. Cutworms are really only a problem if you've got you've newly turned over a garden space. And you'll know because they will eat one plant every night until you go out there and go, oh no, all my plants are dying. But once you see this plant has been eaten off like this, dig around the soil a little bit, because once those little caterpillars eat, they get tired and they just dig into the soil for the day, and they're there so you can find them and then flick them out so the birds can eat them. And then you don't have to spray anything for that because the insect is gone. Oh, grasshoppers. I hope we don't have any grasshopper infestations. They're a little bit more difficult to control on our lettuces. And sometimes just putting a net or cheesecloth over our lettuces, our plants, will be enough to deter them. There's not a good spray that I know of for cabbage or for grasshoppers on our lettuce. Imported cabbage worms. I saw my first butterfly of imported cabbage worms last week, so they're out and about. They really do like cabbages. So this is the adult butterfly. They fly very early. Like I said, I just found one last week. They're those little white butterflies that you'll see flying around. And they overwinter as adults, so they are ready to lay eggs, the females are. And they lay little eggs that then hatch into these green caterpillars. And they are the exact same color as your leaves. So if you have children have the smart eyes or the sharp eyes to find these cabbage worms, but you'll see them because they will eat holes in your lettuces. Again, you can pick those off when you find them, or BT sprayed onto the leaf surfaces will get rid of them. And BT is very safe for humans to eat. It's very safe for pets because basically it rots out their stomach, because caterpillars have a different stomach than humans do. They have an alkaline stomach where we have an acid stomach. So it's very easy to get rid of the cabbage worms. And these are more prevalent in the spring. So sometimes when you transfer your lettuces and plant them in the fall, you avoid some of these cabbage loopers and imported cabbage worms. Leafhoppers have not really been a problem, but they're listed. So I was like, okay, we're going to list them. And there's the little ones that have their wings look like little roofs over their backs, and they just kind of suck the juice out. So this is one kind of leafhopper. This is a different kind of leafhopper. You might see those out there. Not a big problem. So I don't know that I would definitely I wouldn't spray for these. And sow bugs, you might find, we call them roly-polies, but these mostly feed on dead and decaying material. So if you have lettuce leaves that have wilted or had started to go bad and you just kind of left them in there, well, when that decaying plant matter kind of runs out, they'll start to eat your live plants, and they're hard to kind of control. So keep the debris picked up. That will help keep the sow bugs. And if you've got a really moist location, kind of let that dry out a little bit and those sow bugs will go away. So that's kind of a cultural control for sow bugs as opposed to spraying. So this list came from our Home Vegetable Gardening in Kentucky guide, which I call the Vegetable Gardening Bible, because it has everything that you need to want to know about gardening in Kentucky for vegetables. You can get this at your local extension office. You can also download it off the web. But the number here is ID 128 up here in the upper corner. And I just took off of page 43 the insect control options for lettuce. And you can see that it just gives you a number and you're like, what does that mean? At the bottom of the page, there is a list. There's like a key. So they don't have to keep typing all of those words out. They just kind of assigned everybody a number. So, and you'll see horticulture oils in here, neem oils, insecticidal soap, and then all of the other chemicals that you can put on there. We're going to talk about diseases. There's not very many diseases, but damping off is one of them, especially if you're going to start your seeds inside. The thing that I would say is start with new soil, soilless mix every time you start your seeds. And I tend to put a fan just on low, blowing across the top of those plants. It kind of dries out that surface after they come up, and it keeps that dampening off kind of in low numbers. So what I would do is pull these plants out and make sure that I get them out of that soilless mix, because they're not going to do well outside otherwise. And kind of save the plants that I've got growing potting mix. Bottom rot is something that happens probably when we plant when we put our plants a little too close together. There's not really a spray for this. So again, make sure that you use your cultural controls, you spaced them out. You're not planting lettuce in the same spot year after year. And we don't have, I've never seen bottom rot in Kentucky, but it was listed as one of the things that could happen. So I wanted to let you see what that looks like. And tip burn. This is not really a disease because there's not a fungi or a bacteria that causes it, but this is kind of a physiological problem where the tips of our lettuces and all of our cole crops, they turn brown during a hot, dry period that's followed by moist weather. So as long as you keep that soil even moist, that doesn't happen. It's the fluctuations in moisture levels that really affect tip burn. So it's not that they've gotten too much water, it's that they got dry and then got some water. So make sure that they are evenly watered. And this one is actually for plants that are grown in shady areas is not effective. They don't tend to get this problem. So sometimes those grown in full sun areas that may get missed in the watering process, those are the ones that you're going to see the tip burn on. Now, granted, I would not throw this lettuce plant away just for a little tip burn. I just cut it out and, eat the rest of the leaf. It's still good. So we've kind of talked about a little bit of harvesting. We've talked about that, but we're going to really kind of get into it. So to harvest, as soon as those leaves are a suitable size, and you determine that, because there's baby lettuces, there's full size lettuces, so you can pick individual leaves, or when the leaves start to begin to cup inward and form a loose head, and as in the Buttercrunch type of lettuces, you can harvest the whole head at that point. And if your leaves have elongated and overlapped and they form a fairly tight head, some of the romaines will do that as an upright head. You can harvest the whole plant then. So it depends on what you want to do. I tend to not be very patient, and I start picking leaves off when they start to get a little bit bigger, because I've planted enough. I can leave those plants out there and pick them, every 2 or 3 days and be fine. We've picked our leaves or we've picked our lettuces. What happens next? We're going to store them. How are we going to store them? We can't freeze them. That won't work. I wish we could, because we get a lot of lettuce at one time. So we're going to wash those leaves. I just put them in a sink of kind of cool but tepid water. I don't want hot water, just room temperature. And kind of wash those leaves off. And then I kind of put them on a paper towel or a towel to let them dry. If you've got a salad spinner, that dries them really quick, because you want them to be fairly dry and not have any moisture on the leaves. But you can store those plastic bags up to 4 weeks in your refrigerator for loose leaf varieties. So if you're picking off individual leaves, you can store those. And I tend to put a dry paper towel in there just to absorb any extra moisture that I may have left on there on those plants, because you don't want loose moisture in your plastic bags, because that will cause them to mold even faster. But eat it up. It shouldn't last in your refrigerator for 4 weeks. You should be eating all these good nutritious leaves, because they do have a little bit more nutrition, because they're more colorful than, say, our iceberg lettuce that's mostly white. Thank you for being with us today on Hardin County Educational Television.